Well, that's what we look at.
All right, good morning, everyone. We welcome you to the meeting of our ESSA Steering Committee, and it's been a while since we've all been together, so welcome back. And also would like to welcome our newest member, Melinda Kennison, representing the Arkansas PTA, and we are happy to have a continued representation from the Arkansas PTA. They've been a vital partner in our effort over the last couple of years. And Ms. Kennison is a medical technologist at Baptist here in Little Rock, and a graduate of Carlisle and UCA, and her children graduated from North Little Rock. What is it they call themselves? World Class High School, I think is the name that they call that. I think something like that. Yeah, North Little Rock World Class. Yeah. So anyway, we welcome you to this group, and please feel free to engage as we go through the presentations and the conversations. And again, welcome all of you back today. Our first item of business is to dispense with the minutes from our previous meeting, and they have been issued and reported. So I would ask if there are any questions on the minutes or any corrections. And if there are none, I would take a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the minutes as written for May 29th, 2018.
All right, thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. A second by Ms. Phillips. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Minutes are adopted. And now we'll move to our discussion items. Just so you know, too, before Ms. Kaufman starts, this device over to our left is a camera. It's a Zoom camera, and we have Dr. Arola and Hope Worsham who are joining us by Zoom, and they'll be engaged in the presentations as we move forward. They can see us, but we can't see them, all right? But we'll be able to hear them. So welcome, Hope, and welcome, Dr. Arola.
Thank you.
All right, okay. Deb, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning. Deborah Kaufman, Assistant Commissioner, Public School Accountability. I've kind of put some items, and if you recall at our very last meeting, at the end of our meeting, we developed the agenda for this meeting. And so we'll be as flexible as you need to be to ensure that you have all of your questions answered. I wanted to start with stakeholder feedback on our reports. Just to kind of put the timeline back in place for you, I contacted CCSSO, which is the Chief State School Officers Organization, which we are a member, and talked to them about helping us set up our procedures for how we would continuously survey our stakeholders across the state to get feedback on our reports. We have approached our reports differently than other states. Other states have just a simple report card. Because we were far ahead of that of other states with a really massive data system, and are really blessed to have really great IT people in our state. We already had My School Info up and running. So we were already putting out public reports, and so, and we already had My School Info going. So we merged those efforts together and put our ESSA School Index on My School Info. We made a decision to provide a one-page overview, the more in-depth ESSA School Index, and then continue our report card. Our report card contains the information that the federal government has asked us to include, as well as items that come from state legislative code that ask us to include about schools. So it's quite lengthy as well. So I wanted to know what our stakeholders knew about My School Info, and did they know that we really have these nested reports. That one page easy to read, I want to go deeper, I want to know everything. So in thinking about those 3 layers of reporting, we partnered with Battelle for Kids, an organization that has helped us previously when we were working on our ESSA plan. They all agreed to be a great partner to come in and help us. So we kind of got our plan together before we released the 2017 ESSA Index Report. And if you recall, that happened April the 11th of 2018. I'll lovingly call that last year, even though it's only been 6 months. That was last year. After we released that report, that was the first time that our stakeholders had seen that one-page ESSA accountability at a glance and that full-blown ESSA School Index Report. They had seen the report card before, maybe, if they'd been going to the website. So Battelle for Kids and CCSSO worked with us and set up procedures to host 4 large focus groups, and we did that around the state, different regions. And we did it in the summer because that's kind of how our timeline fell. That's the first thing we've learned, never do them in the summer. Because, you know, people have other things, they don't learn about it till after it's already happened, all of those good reasons. But it was a good practice run for us to get our questions together and think through some of the issues. We also conducted a statewide survey just to get a feel for how many people had actually been into the reports and what their first reactions to those reports were. In addition to that work going on, we also volunteered with CCSO for a Critical Friends Review. And the Critical Friends Review happened in August, and that was an opportunity for us to have our reports reviewed by other state leaders, accountability leaders, really experts on the CCSSO team. They too gave us feedback on those initial reports and gave us suggestions. So what I wanted to do today was kind of let you know where we are with all of that feedback. The first thing that came out in January of 2017 was federal guidance on report cards. Now this is an exciting read, several pages there to read there, that tells us what the federal government is expecting us to report on. Now, we're fortunate in that most of that has been reported in the past, so we're very comfortable with having that information on a report card. Some of the new pieces is it requires us to do some cross-tabulation. And cross-tabulation means that you have to do the breakdowns. And so I want to prepare you for the problem this is going to cause. We still have to do it. And our critical friends gave us some really great feedback on how to do that and how to make it manageable within our report card. Their recommendation is that we make that a link in the report card. If people want to go to it, they can, but not to let it muddy up the whole visual report. That was their recommendation. In the cross-tabulation, you take all of your subgroups and then you have to break them down by additional demographics. And when you do that, what that's going to cause, because we're such a small state and our schools are small and they're not as diverse as we may think they are, when you start breaking those down into all of those cross tabs to prevent any issues with student privacy, most of that information will be restricted values because the numbers will be under 10. So we will follow the guidance of the federal guidance, but I wanted you to know that ahead of time and to get that out in our public that we are required to do this, but unless you're in a very large district with very large populations of schools that are pretty diverse, that the majority of those cross tabs will be RV, restricted values. Any questions about that? The other things that our stakeholders told us is that we need to make some things easily accessible. So I want to take us out to the website and show you some of our very newest features. And while we're advertising the Every Student Succeeds Act plan at the top of our page, what I want you to see is that we have 2 new, very quick buttons on our homepage. And the first one is here. It's the turquoise button. It's the ESSA button that takes you directly to our ESSA plan. And if you're pulling this up on your phone, these pull up very much at the top. So they're very quick and easy because we know that the majority of our stakeholders are using their phone to access this information. If you look to the green button, My School Info now has a prominent place. It's always been down here on the data link, but we've moved it up to a more obvious and brilliant spot. Another thing that I wanted to show you is under the Parents tab. We are continuing to work on this page. They're doing some regional meetings right now, but you'll see that My School Info has a very prominent place. We have some very new short videos, and when I say short, 30 seconds, 1 minute. They're very easy. We've been sending those out via social media so that people can access them, but they just quickly tell the story so that I just want to know a little bit about it. I want to read more. I can come to our informational documents and read more, and it hopefully is helping people to prepare to open up the reports. Some people are a little nervous about going to My School Info, and what I can tell you is you can't break it. We've had 1 million users. We're moving far beyond that number right now, but they haven't broken it. So we're going out across the state encouraging everyone to go in there and start pushing buttons. Give it a try. I encourage you to talk to all of your friends and neighbors and family members and pull it up and just show how easy My School Info is to use. But in case someone needs to know more or they want to see something hands-on, right there was an easy link that our office put together that just shows you step by step. Put the name in, click that little search button, the name will come up, you verify that's the school you want to go to, and then once you're inside, you can go to the school rating for that easy at-a-glance that gives you the one-page state accountability letter grade and the federal accountability for all students and the 6 subpopulations. And then if you go on to reports, that report tab right here, you can click down on the ESSA School Index and you'll see that ESSA School Index come up. That ESSA School Index has a lot of really great features, and one of the brand new ones is on each page, there's a little colorful button at the top. This one doesn't show it, but it's right at the top that links you back to those one-pagers that tell what that information is about. And that's what we heard from our stakeholders is they want those quick buttons they can click back on to see information. They want quick access to the information. So from our stakeholders, then we will take that information, take it into our report card, which is the next report under reports. And our goal is to continually use that information to upgrade our systems and make them better and more useful to our stakeholders across the state. We will continue this process of surveying and holding focus groups across the state. We plan to do that every year. So we've just released the 2018 ESSA School Index reports 6 months early. Our schools are using those reports. It's really an exciting time, and we will plan to get out during the school year and bring our patrons in across the state to gather their feedback. We've been out talking to school board members, and Gina will tell you more about that later, but people really are using My School Info. So we're super excited about it. We definitely need more and more. We want everyone to know that they have access to these reports. So questions on that feedback?
I would be curious if any of y'all have received feedback yourselves from your districts or communities about any of these reports. I think My School Info is definitely the most prominent, and with over 1 million page views now, certainly one of the most popular pages on our site or tools on our site. But I was just curious if you all have had any formal or informal feedback on any of those.
You know, the feedback for me is just the availability of the data, the early availability of the data. We've had opportunities to sit down now with our school board. We've had opportunities to sit down with our building level leaders and really analyze our data and make adjustments where necessary and set some goals for this year. So that's been very valuable for us, and we appreciate the department's efforts to make that happen each year. I think it'll make a significant difference across the state.
Thank you.
How much difference have the conversations been this year with having the 2018 data available in the first part of the 2018 school year?
Well, considering in the past, we've kind of had to imagine what our results were and make some adjustments according to what we thought we may have done well and areas where we needed to improve in the past. Seeing those numbers today and knowing the adjustments that need to be made, and it just allows us the opportunity to analyze our curriculum and our instruction more effectively, having that data available.
Okay, thank you.
Better use of intervention is so, I mean, you know, from the start, okay, this is where we need, these are the students that we need to target, and being able to put those in those flexible groupings so that we can begin to address the needs of those students who did not meet the standards.
It's really the site and the information has really helped impact our PLC process too. Like it kind of leaves that in the forefront of what they're doing and what their ideas. Just kind of like what you said. I am curious about access to our Spanish-speaking families, because it's a big push in my way of thinking in our district of family engagement. So I know our superintendent talks about My School Info and its availability in her parent council. She has a parent council, and she speaks with them about that. So I'm curious as to if that's available for our Spanish-speaking families. I know our population of Spanish speakers is continuously growing, so it's one that I do think about.
It is certainly something on our list for us to work on, but yet to this point, we do not have it in other languages. But we're certainly interested in, we'd appreciate your help with feedback on what parts, how we could, how we might do that.
I think that's important too, because the most, I guess the frequently used sections, maybe to help us prioritize the availability of Spanish language for those sections. And I'm not sure that we would know that at the department. I think that's feedback that we would need from the districts. So if you have any feedback on that, that would be very helpful. It's good,
Absolutely.
good suggestion.
Can I ask a question about the? You said now we're going to be able to cross. What word?
It's called cross-tabulation.
The cross tabulation. So when there's not a relevant value of 10, and if schools are to compare each other, if I compare my performance in a subpopulation that doesn't have a relevant value versus a school district that does have a relevant value, will there be any comparison in that regard? Is there an ability to do that?
So you can do the comparison within My School Info. You can pull that up as when you select schools that you want to go in and do that comparison. Within the accountability system, or within accountability, that comparison is not a part of our accountability. What I can tell you is that we do look at our data statewide to see, do we have statewide issues that need to be resolved? And we're trying to take on the practices that we want districts and schools to take on. So we're very much conscious of plan, do, check.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at our data to make our plans and allocating our funds to those appropriate places based on the statewide data. And so, for example, We know that across the state, we are underserving our students with special needs. And so we're not rushing to run out and buy something. We're rushing to have really thoughtful conversations. What are we doing? What's our belief systems? What are our current practices? So where are we really as a state? And then when we begin to unpack those belief systems, then we can identify what our next steps will be to change that. I can say that across the state, we've had remarkable improvement out of our English learners. So that just says to me that when there's a concentrated, focused effort, we can serve kids. And so knowing that, I think we want to look at this subgroup and say, what are those barriers that we need to remove so that we serve those students just as well as we've served other subpopulations of students?
So the cross-tabulation is statewide perspective as opposed to individual schools. And I'm only asking.
Yes.
So that's the concern is when we don't have a relevant value in some, for example, EL as being one that would probably not have relevant values in some schools, but would in others. It's probably hard to make, I guess, a judgment on how well we're performing in those areas, because we'll have some schools that aren't reported because they don't meet that value. Is it individual school or district?
So it's by school and state.
Okay.
And so it breaks down, I was trying to look at some of the cross-tabulation. It goes into EL students, non-EL students, males, females. It does that by each subpopulation for each one of the big indicators. It's quite extensive. It'll be massive pages.
Sure.
Massive pages. And just the sad thing is, so many of them will be restricted value.
Sure.
I think our value is going to be coming back to look at it at the state level to see what we can learn about ourselves.
That makes sense.
Will it be possible to look at that in a regional aspect? I know when our company does surveys, if it's too small, they bump it up to the next level to increase the number.
Let me check on that. I'm not sure. We haven't built that part yet, so that's a good time to, I'll see if we can cross-tab by co-op region,
It's not a bad idea.
see if that helps. I don't know if we can, but I'll see. That's good feedback.
Okay.
Thank
All right,
you.
Is that it, Deb? Okay. Thank you very much. Good conversation. All right, next item is Hope Worsham, and Hope will be discussing the peer review process for ACT Aspire. Hope, are you there?
Good morning.
Good morning. Oh, we can see her. All right, excellent.
Hi, I turned my video back on. How are you guys?
Hi, good.
All right, I'm going to share a little bit of a presentation here with you. Can you see the slides, Commissioner Key?
Yeah, Dan needs just a second, Hope, so he's
Okay.
working on it. We saw you for a brief second, and then you were gone, so.
Can you stop sharing your screen for just a second so I can,
Yeah, Hope, he,
there we go, give me just a second.
all right,
Trying to get you over.
there you go.
Now go.
Okay.
All right, you're on with us now, Hope. We see you.
Okay, perfect. So we did have to submit evidence for our general assessment and our alternate assessment to the federal government for the process called peer review. And so that's where we submit evidence on 30 critical elements to the department, from everything from the way our test is designed, the blueprint, through the validity, things about our accommodations, and then also about reports back to the public. So all of that evidence was submitted. Again, there were 30 critical elements that we had to submit, and we submitted all that evidence in July of 2018. We heard back from the federal government in April of 2018, and then we responded back to them in May of 2018. And our follow-up steps going forward are going to be in January. We're going to do an independent alignment study in fall of 2019. We're going to resubmit. So that's just our timeline, where we are right now, what's already happened, where we will be going. So I'll talk through these now.
Hope, just go back to that previous slide, just to make sure. I think we submitted in July 2017, right?
I did. Thank you, sir, for catching that. Yes, that was July of 17 that we submitted, and then we heard back from them in April of 18.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay, thank you.
So we provided for you a copy of the letter that we got from the federal government. You can read the entire letter, but basically what it states is that ACT Aspire did substantially meet the requirements of federal peer review, and they do request some additional evidence. So we submitted for 30 critical elements. They require additional evidence on 7 of those critical elements. So we put together a timeline to submit that additional evidence to them. The good news here is that ACT Aspire has substantially met the requirements thus far. So that means that, we have confidence in our system, the federal government has confidence in our system, and that's good for us to get that validation from them. So one of the biggest pieces that we are going to need to submit to the federal government is an alignment study. And so basically what that does is take our standards and our assessment and does a independent review of those 2 pieces of information to determine, is what's on the assessment in our standards, and are the concepts that are in our standards on our assessment. And so we have contracted with ACS Ventures to lead the study. They're an independent company, so there'll be an independent group doing the study. We are going to have Arkansas educators be our review panelists. So we are currently in the process of putting together a commissioner's memo that will go out hopefully by the end of next week, that will recruit panelists from across the state. So those would be hopefully teachers or instructional leaders in our schools that have deep knowledge of the standards. And they'll come together in Little Rock for 4 days in January. And they will conduct this independent alignment study, and then ACS will provide us back with a report of that study. This alignment study will address 4 of the 7 needed critical elements that the federal government is still requiring from us. Our technical advisory committee has provided input on the design of the study, and they will be providing input during the study. So we'll have a member of the technical advisory present during the entire study who will do a write-up, report back to the full technical advisory committee, and then they will provide feedback on that process just to make sure that it is valid and reliable and that we can stand behind that. So that will happen in January of 2019, and then ACS will provide us a report by the March Technical Advisory Committee meeting so that we can resubmit that evidence next fall. We also have ACT working on several studies for ADE. They presented the ideas to the Technical Advisory Committee in September. The Technical Advisory Committee provided input on what those studies look like, what they may need, how they may need to be changed so that they can be stronger. And ACT is currently working on a few of these studies for us to address 2 of the needed critical elements. They will have these ready in the fall of 2018. So these studies are, they should be ready soon, actually. These studies are addressing things like how does ACT Aspire, taking the data from ACT Aspire and maybe from another assessment and showing that we're getting similar results in the same subpopulations that we're getting in ACT Aspire. So just to validate that those scores are reliable, because up next to another assessment, then we're getting the same results, similar results for the students. And then the last thing that we are working on is one of the critical elements address the availability of reports in alternate formats. So that would be potentially maybe a Braille format of a individual student report, or a Spanish translation, or any native language translation. So this will address one of the critical elements that is still needed. We are currently looking at what other states are doing in this area to provide this information. And we will be putting a process in for the spring of 2019 to make alternate forms of a student's individual report available to parents. This will be on an as requested basis. So a parent would request from the ADE to have their child's report translated, and we will make that available to them. So we will have to work with schools on how they present that information out to parents and let them know that this is an available possibility. So those 3 steps will address all of the needed additional 7 critical elements. So we will work and put all of that information together and resubmit to the feds in the fall of 2019. And we should hear back from them in the winter of 2020 if the assessment system has fully met all of those requirements. So that would be for ACT Aspire. We did change to dynamic learning maps this year for our alternate assessment. We had originally submitted evidence for the MSAA assessment, but due to the change, we will have to resubmit evidence to the federal government for the dynamic learning maps. So right now, we are working on gathering that evidence so that we can submit that to the federal government. The DLM assessment itself has already been approved for peer review, so we just need to submit the state evidence that shows the state procedures on things like monitoring or our state standards and the alignment of our state standards to the DLM assessment. So we are in the process of gathering that information right now, and we will be submitting that to the federal government very soon. So that's where we are with the peer review process, and I'll take any questions that you have.
Okay, any questions?
Hope, are there other states using ACT Aspire for their assessment as well?
There are not other states that are using ACT Aspire as their general assessment to meet the requirement from the federal government. There are 2 other states that are using it in 9 and 10. I believe that's Wyoming is still using it, and I would lie to you if I told you the other one. So there are 2 that are still using in 9 and 10.
Okay, I was just curious if other states were facing the same critical elements as us, but it sounds like we're kind of unique if we're the only state that has it in all of our tested grades.
Yeah.
I think, Hope, though, that the other states that are using something besides Park or Smarter Balanced, which, there have been a lot of states that have moved away from that, they still have to follow the same process. So they may not be ACT Aspire, but they're having to answer the same questions and provide the same support documentation in those types of studies for their state-developed assessments. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. And it's very common to have to resubmit information. So even Park states, Smarter Balanced states that are writing their own assessment, most of them are having to resubmit evidence. I don't know that I've heard of one that submitted on the first time and got fully approved. So it is very common to have to resubmit. If you look at the fact that we're only resubmitting on 7 elements out of 30, I think that's pretty strong for us. And I'm proud of the information that we already submitted to the federal government. It just shows that our system is very strong, that we have in place in Arkansas, which can give us confidence in our assessment system.
Ms. Newton?
Go back to the dynamic learning maps. Tell me again, what are you using that for? And you said you adopted it this year, but what was you using it for?
Correct. That's for our alternate assessment. So students either take ACT Aspire, or if they have severe cognitive disabilities, they will take the dynamic learning maps assessment. So it's just the alternate in ELA, math, and science.
And so that has not undergone the peer review, or it has?
The assessment itself has gone through peer review, and it has substantially met all requirements, so it's fully passed. We just have to submit Arkansas state evidence, so that would be our procedures in the state, how we put information out to our stakeholders, things like that.
Okay.
But the assessment itself has fully passed.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Jeff Cope, back to your question. I can't name the states, but it's our understanding that there are states that are kind of watching to see how this progresses with us and ACT Aspire. And if we're successful, which we believe we will be, we anticipate ACT Aspire will be looked at closer by other states for adopting for their entire tested range.
I would imagine that will be the case. I've noticed several states that have changed over the last several years. They've made many changes, and so we have, I believe, we've made, it's progressive maybe on making the taken the stand that we're gonna use this one assessment as our tool, but I think that we'll be a leader in this area in the near future. Other states will join. ACT Aspire has been a good assessment for us, and I feel like it's gonna help prepare our students better for future assessments as they prepare for college and career.
Well, and I'll add on to that, and just to brag on Hope and her team and assessment. Arkansas is really kind of pushing a little bit on our approach to assessment. Certainly, the adoption of ACT Aspire was one, but the K2 assessment is another, where they brought the idea of let's set forward what we know we want in a K2 assessment, but then open it up for providers, multiple providers, to offer, and then districts able to choose what works best for them. And I think we're seeing in our RISE work that having multiple options is reflecting, I think, very positively in those districts. So, and that's an idea that came from her team when we were trying to identify a replacement for the ITBS. So while you're on the screen there, Hope, I just want to brag on you and your folks on the work y'all been doing there.
Thanks. Thank you, sir.
I think DLM is another area that's going to really be helpful to our students. I mean, to those kids that take that have that assessment, I think it's going to be a better, it's going to be a better holistic approach to seeing where those kids are. So, All right. Any other questions or thoughts? Thank you, Hope, for updating us on that.
Thank you,
We'll
sir.
go back to Ms. Kaufman and Dr. Arola now, and they will update us on the ESSA School Index and move right into the ESSA school, or the school rating. So number 3 and number 4 on our agenda. Who's starting?
So I alluded to our timeline change a while ago, but we did release the 2017 ESSA School Index on April the 11th, and then the 2018 ESSA School Index on October the 12th. So as you've described, it's made it useful, in my opinion, to really help schools. And I really want to brag on our schools. As a part of that process, we were able to provide those reports to our school districts in a private view for 2 weeks prior to posting for the public. And the reason we do that is Dr. Arola's team runs all of the calculations and puts all of that data into a massive Excel sheet. And you know it's massive because one day we were looking at some data and we were in column MO. You know how far you have to get to column MO? And we weren't at the end. So it's humongous, and it's just hard to really wrap your mind around that. But once that data is all put into that Excel sheet and sent to Regent's team, they then build the code that reads that massive Excel sheet and puts all of the data into those ESSA School Index reports, 4,000 plus schools. So it's just remarkable that that can happen. So we rely on our schools during that school review time to go in and make sure that every little data number ended up in the right place on those reports. And last year, April, we found little bitty errors, like the 4-year and the 5-year graduation rate got mixed up, and the column was sending the wrong information to the wrong spot on the report. Little things like that, and our schools were so quick to catch those errors and help us get those corrected. But this year, when we had our review of ESSA School Index reports, I just have to tell you how proud I am of our school districts. In fact, this morning, we were talking to our school district. We're past the time to make any changes, but they're still working on knowing exactly how all of the data came together. And so I have to tell you that we have utilized our business rules so much that when we're on the phone with a school, we have ours out, we're reading, and they have theirs out and they're reading. That's how exciting this is. This morning, we were having a conversation about 5 students. So we're Zooming with Dr. Rolla's office. We're Zooming with the school. We're in our office, and we have all of our databases pulled up. We've got our business rules out, and we're tracking through, and we're trying to figure out why they believe their numbers are different from what we have reported. And as we worked through that with them so specifically, we can identify where the errors are, what might not have gotten coded correctly. Was a student's transcript showing the accurate information? It's just been so exciting because for years our schools have put data in, but they didn't know what happened with it. And then we built My School Info, and we started seeing that data come back out. But when we put those things into our accountability system, we really gave so much of it value. And I have to say that our school districts have stepped up a tremendous, huge step. They have really gotten in there, they've studied these business rules, and they really know how that index is calculated, how every student played a role, every student's score played a role in each tiny piece of this index. And I think that's just a tribute to the quality of educators we have in our state, that they understand that their school's more than a score. So they're not trying to figure out how to do something unethical. That's not their intent at all. Their intent is, how do we best serve our students? Have we best reported our information? Are we best serving? So likewise, a school district called most recently and said, we have a student that, because we're about to make a decision, the student is not going to give us a point in on-time credits because we're about to make a decision that's just right for the kid, not going to benefit us in accountability. And in our office, we were like, we agree. It's always students first. And so, once again, I'm just so excited that they called and talked it through with us because they just want another they want a critical friend that says, okay, have we done everything? But we're always going to take the student side instead of trying to get a point. And so I think that's a celebration. We're doing the right things. We should all be very proud of our schools. So as I look at the ESSA School Index, I want to bring your attention not only to these business rules, but to a second document that we put on our website, and I'll show you where it is in a minute. It's called our statistical report. So each year, we put out a set of business rules. So the 2018 business rules for the 2018 ESSA School Index and the 2018 statistical report. In that statistical report, it comes back for all of our stakeholders to go in and look. But we're watching this report to see how are we moving over time. What do we need to learn about ourselves? And so, as you can see, and as you know, our ESSA School Index divides our schools into elementary, middle, and high school. And it looks at those specific indicators that we put into our index. Schools can also go in and look and say, in this statistical report, and say, okay, what percentile? Where did I fall in the percentile range? I look at my overall score, and I can look at myself in comparison. So coming back to that comparison question. But also I can look to see, how far have I really, what kind of progress am I really making? What is my score telling me related to the mean and to any standard deviation above the mean or below the mean. And I have to say, we had some schools that knocked it out of the park this year. They're really doing remarkable things. So anytime somebody says, oh, we can't make that kind of improvement, or we really can't show progress in this index, that's not true, because our schools already are. So it's really exciting to me. Our sub-pops, we have that same breakdown for the subpopulations by those grade spans. So I encourage you to go in and look at that report, and I'm going to show you how to get to it. So we're going to go back to I'm going to go from the beginning. So we're going to come back to our home page, and we're going to go to our ESSA page on the turquoise box. And on this page, as always, you see the plan, the Arkansas State ESSA plan, and then you see informational documents. And informational documents is where we've been building those tools for all of our stakeholders to have very quick, easy access. Once again, a quick link back over to My School Info, to that very easy step 2-pager that I showed you. A nice new letter from our commissioner, a letter to our partners in education. And we've sorted these documents into 3 categories. Just information about Arkansas's ESSA plans, really easy to read information. Information about the index. You saw those last year. We went through all of those 1-pagers, and those are the 1-pagers that are now linked on the actual index in My School Info. But here we are under business rules and statistics. So you see the 2017 business rules and the 2018 business rules. Schools can download those either as a document, because they may want to make notes on here, or they can download it as a PDF. Then you see the statistical reports for 16, 17, and 18. And then you see our state assessment peer review document. So we continue to make everything available to our public to go in and study. And I'm just proud to say they are. They really are studying. So many of our school personnel are pulling those reports up and reading them right along with us. Another piece that I want to bring to your attention is a new piece, and it's called Schools on the Move Toward Excellence. And the State Board got to see kind of the overview of this last week. But what we did on this page is take the opportunity to identify some of our schools that are making really remarkable progress. And we should be paying our attention on what's going well so that we can learn from it. And I'm happy to say that not only did our press reach out to some of these schools and interview them, but yesterday we were with co-op directors and teacher center coordinators, and they have been reaching out to these schools and having conversations about, what are you doing? And one in particular had made a really large improvement in their growth, and they reached out and they said, well, what are you doing? And the principal said, well, we brought Chromebooks. She goes, that didn't make that kind of change. She said, well, we have a really solid reading and writing curriculum that we've been doing for quite some time now. And what does the reading teacher in you say? I know why you've got growth, right? Because you have a curriculum that you're being really diligent about implementing, and the fruits of your labor are beginning to show. And that's what we're hearing from our school districts. Questions about ESSA School Index? All right, then I will take us back to school rating. As you know, Act 744 of 2017 gave us some flexibility on assigning letter grades using our ESSA School Index. And our stakeholders had asked us to align our state and federal accountability as much as we could. I'm happy to report that we had a really great distribution of letter grades. As you know, we came to you previously and said we need to make a slight adjustment to our scale because of the ELA cut score changes. Denise is on the line, but she's, since we actually have the data, has gone back to check and say we made a wise decision. I think our schools were pleased that we made that proposal early on so that it could be implemented in time to get these reports out quickly. We have encouraged our schools to communicate with the public that they're more than just a letter grade, that these letter grades start questions, they don't give answers. We encourage our schools to go in, take their stakeholders into the ESSA School Index and really have some in-depth conversations. And as you reported, that's what's happening. We're hearing that all across the state, that superintendents and school boards are sitting down and having these conversations. We got a lot of calls. What day are they going to be posted for the public? Because we want to have a community meeting and invite our stakeholders in to learn more about our school. And I heard and saw online, on social media posts, as well in newspapers, some really amazing reports about what schools were doing. And they were very honest and open about their letter grades, but really went on to explain, and this is what it means, and this is what we're doing about it. So I really think we're beginning to move from that center point of, oh, it's just a letter grade and that's it. I heard last night from school board members that they're really asking the patrons to think about the school more than just a label, as in labeling them with just a letter grade. There's so much more. They're really serving diverse needs of diverse children and really working to break down the barriers to serve those kids at the very best of their ability. So questions?
You know, we had several schools that received A's,
Mhm.
and we celebrated. And those schools that didn't receive A's, they're definitely learning more about the index to try to find a way to improve. And while we're not here to label schools, the goal is that all of our schools will eventually move up and improve, and those improvements can happen with growth or just overall performance. But it's just exciting for me as a superintendent to be able to see those schools that maybe knew that they could have done better if they just understood the index in certain areas a little better. And I think that's gonna cause improvement for this year in our school district, and I'm sure it will across the state.
And I'm happy to also report that I talked to a superintendent recently that had a really high letter grade, but the superintendent was not pleased when they went into the SQSS indicator and dropped down reading on grade level. The superintendent was not pleased, and so they had their professional development day and went to work on, hey, we can't be satisfied with a high letter grade. We've got to really serve kids to the best of our ability. And I'm thinking that just really speaks to the commitment of our educators to transform Arkansas to lead the nation. That's what they're really doing. They're not being, oh, we have an A, we don't have any work to do.
Well, I think it goes also to speak to now they have more information that they can dig deeper.
That's right.
You know, just a letter grade by itself, you can't really say what it is you need to work on to get better. But with the breakdowns and the information, the different layers of information that we have available, not just to schools, but publicly, you know, that's the important part, engaging in that public conversation about how can we make these situations better. Deb, talk about, because Dr. Jeffcoat mentioned in his remarks something that kind of came to mind of, are you looking at the right things? And I'm reminded of conversations we have where, you know, maybe a school leader is looking at, well, how do I boost service learning credits? You know, that's a good conversation, but that's not going to significantly change your overall grade. Looking at growth, looking at the core instruction piece, that's where the bang for the buck is. I mean, talk about some of the conversations and how that's changed from where we started to where we are today with your group's conversations with school folks.
So I think we've been on every end of the spectrum with conversations around these. We've been, one school said, oh, so we get points for community service learning. We'll just put everybody in that. No, it doesn't fit everyone. Or we're going to put everybody in a computer science class. So everyone.
Careful, the governor might be listening.
I hope he is, because while we want students to take those courses, we want to maximize the learning for each child. So every child taking an AP or IB course would be great, but we need to go where their passions are. We need to grow these children into the adults that they will be, and that's where our student success plans are going to come in and be so helpful to our school districts and to our students. But we're not trying to make a one-size-fits-all. And so what I'm so excited about, and this is the evolution that's occurred between April and October, is those were the conversations in April. You know, I'm mad about attendance being counted. You know, I had one kid sick and you've marked me down. Listen, it's 15% of your score. But what's so exciting now is our school districts are realizing that if I'm really paying attention to those school quality and student success components, because I can see them move. And so what they've learned is I'm going to go in there and make sure that I'm reporting my data accurately. So we've had a big learning curve about that our cycle reports need to be corrected. The correction period is before you hit submit and certify, right? It's not after. You can't call me now and say, I'd like to change last year's data. No, when you submit, that was your chance. You have days in there to correct. So our school districts are taking more advantage of entering data correctly, which is great for our state because now we have correct data coming out and available to the public. So there's been a lot of changes there. For example, one school district I talked to said, we never see cycle reports before they're submitted. Maybe that's a conversation that needs to have a larger leadership team looking at before they're certified. And so they're changing policies, they're changing procedures internally that's going to make a difference for their kids. So just by looking at those SQSS components, people are really beginning to pay attention. But then in those conversations, we've really gotten into the students. And when we talk about the students, now they're interested in, well, are these students growing as much as they really need to be growing? So they've shown growth, but are they showing enough? And now maybe we want to see growth at the student level. So what's interesting is at a time 6 months ago when people were drowning in data, now that they understand the data, they're asking for more data. And so I think it just speaks to the shift in people's minds when they really understand what they have and how they can use it to really impact learning for kids. Then now they know specifically what they want to ask for. And I think that helps all of us because it helps us to think about how do we evaluate our accountability system to say, has it really informed us? And what are those things that we might like to include in the future? Can we be testing them now instead of, let's put them in and see what happens? Why don't we test them and know what happens? And so those are the things that I think is really amazing about the work that our stakeholders did in putting this together.
I would just say that what you said is exactly right. It's created the conversation. We have so many conversations now that revolve around those components that we know are critical to the success of our students. And so that's been important for our school district to see and hear. We're not the only ones involved in this conversation. It's taking place across the state. And I was in RISE training yesterday, and I think that we are, as a state, we're doing some really, really good things, and RISE is one of them. And the fact that we're having consistent conversation at every level. And I had my high school principal in there with me, and he's just benefiting from it as much as everyone else. And I just think it's important that these results, the thing that we see is that the overall impact it comes from those conversations. And so it's important for us to know that, and know that we're not just focusing on our individual schools and just individual students, but we're looking at a state, from a state perspective as well.
I've really heard so many more school districts networking, how talking to each other, calling each other, hey, how'd you do this? We're having this conversation, what are you doing? So the thing I think that just kind of summarizes what we've seen in 6 months is, at the beginning, we heard of the department is making us, we're doing this out of compliance, kind of that thought process of we're just doing this. And now, 6 months later, the conversations are just like you described. First of all, they're conversations. They're focused conversations. They're student-centered conversations. And I never hear the word compliance come up, because they're doing the right things for kids, and the right thing for kids is always beyond compliance. And so that, I think, is what's going to move our state, is because now we're putting our energies not in doing it for the department, we're doing it for our kids. And it's just the right direction.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. I was just wanting to reinforce that one of the things that I've really seen, and I think the last 2 days being here at the INACOL conference, where the whole focus is on students and how do we become more student-focused or student-centered, that what we've got with that ESSA index and what our schools are beginning to do, this whole idea that it's a signal, and you use this signal to dig deeper using a local cycle of inquiry. It's that's what we were hearing from a lot of the schools that were talking about how they've made the changes they've made and how they've done more things that are helping students to be successful. They're using this big information not as a verdict of this is who we are, but it's a signal about where are we right now and how do we do better. And it was really, it was neat to see in several of the sessions that I attended where they were talking about how do you evaluate or know whether these efforts towards being more student focused are getting want. Several folks have mentioned that they have that that plan, do, check cycle in there, that deeper cycle of inquiry. So if what you see in the student success and school quality indicator gets you to talking, how can you look more closely locally at what's happening that can make a difference? And that's, you know, that theory of action, that's, I think, the most exciting thing for me to see is how folks are beginning across our schools to connect. Here's the information, and this is a signal that we start with, and then we go deeper into that, what's going on locally at our school. And sometimes it's data and sometimes it's practice, and having those conversations about what matters for students. It's such a different world from 2004, 2005, when we were first looking at AYP reports. It's a good place to be for kids in Arkansas. And it's really neat to be someplace with a national audience out here and realizing Arkansas really is leading the nation in this work.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Earl. There's one thing that I wanted to point out. I don't know, Stacy, I don't know how many superintendents have actually attended RISE training, but this is not the first time I've heard Dr. Jeffcoat mention that. I think that's a great example to set for others. There have been. I mean, I've heard Skipper Ward at Magnolia has, said he went with his team to RISE training. He said it was absolutely the best training and the best PD he had ever been to. You may be the first one that I've heard say they took their high school principal. Maybe not. You're the first one I've heard mention that. But I mean, that's we need to celebrate that. That seems like a small thing, but it's not. I mean, it is not a small thing for a superintendent to say, this is important enough for me to go and attend this training. And it's just so you know what's going on. and you can reinforce that. So I appreciate you doing that and speaking to that and just setting that example for others, so that, you know, when you're at your co-op meetings, I hope you tell them, hey, look, ladies and gentlemen, this is important. You need to do this. So thank you for sharing that with us. Really appreciate it.
You know, honestly, I just think that it is important for all of us to be on the same page. And I'd heard so many things about RISE, so many positive things, that I wanted to at least learn more. So we have now completed our third day of RISE training, and we have a couple more to do to finish out. But it's been a valuable learning experience for us. And I have also heard several other superintendents who have taken the initiative, because it's not a requirement that superintendents attend, but it is very important for superintendents to know, to be aware of what the expectation is and what is being shared with our teachers. So it's been well received, I believe, across the state for the most part.
Yeah, and Ms. Phillips, you were sharing positive
Right.
with me before our meeting about
Right.
results that you all are seeing.
Right,
Yeah.
because it has added that phonemic awareness and phonological piece to our phonics that we didn't have, and we were beginning already to see some improvements in our classroom with our STAR assessments. So we're very, very pleased, and we think we've taken our first NWA, so we're looking for it in November to take our second one. So we think that we're going to see the growth. We're expecting to see the growth in our students, that they're going to meet their learning targets, and we're going to have more students who are actually on grade level. So
That's
we're
awesome.
very pleased with that.
Just more examples of
Yeah.
moving beyond compliance,
And having the right conversations.
the right
So
conversations.
Thank you all for that.
So let me also tell you that as a part of ESSA, the state is required to identify schools that are in need of comprehensive support and or additional targeted support. We have contacted those schools. We are asking all of our stakeholders not to label them. We are meeting with them. We will be offering them the opportunity to apply for additional federal dollars, the 1003 dollars. But we are very much treating them individually, and we're meeting with them individually. We have, if you take 5% of our Title I schools, that is 41 schools, and we've actually identified 43. You also include graduation rates below 66.667%. With all of those schools included, we look forward to working alongside them. And they each have very unique needs. They are serving very unique children, and so these extra dollars will help to really put in some high-quality evidence-based practices to serve those students. So I've been encouraged from the very beginning, but I continue to encourage that we don't try to lump them all together and say, oh, they're this or oh, they're that. Every state is identifying the lowest performing 5%. Even Massachusetts, who claims to be number one, is identifying 5%, just like we are. So what we are excited to see is, can we, over time, keep raising our scores from at the top, at the bottom, everywhere in between. And so I think that's just speaks to our focus to evaluate or check our accountability plan. So we have identified, we've sent letters, we've been on the phone with them, and we're now calculating how much money they're going to have available to them, and we'll be going out to help them with our planning application and looking forward to working alongside them. They're looking forward to learning from each other and from other schools, and hopefully other schools will be looking forward to learning from them. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Dr. Arola. All right. Are we ready to keep on moving? Anybody need a break? We've been going at it for a while? Okay. Then we'll move to item number 5, and these are reports from our ESSA advisory groups, and the first one is Dr. Boyd, and she will be presenting on the accountability group.
Thank you, Commissioner Key. Alexandra Boyd, Public School Accountability. We met with the ESSA Accountability Advisory Team at the beginning of this month. We covered some of the things you have already talked about with Ms. Kaufman. We talked about the new timelines for reporting that, we had the private viewing out earlier in October, and then we released on October 12th. We discussed the adjustments to the ELA cut scores and the A to F scale scores. We also mentioned some amendments, which I think you'll hear more about from Tricia Kerr shortly, that we were gonna make to the ESSA plan. We talked about ESSA monitoring and evaluation, which is relatively new to the process. And just a kind of quick way to think about it is that in public school accountability, we have a ESSA monitor, and that monitor is kind of doing the qualitative analysis, reaching out to districts, discussing with them, things that could be happening in their districts and, impacts that that's having on their students. And then the evaluation position, which is a position I hold, is more of a quantitative review of the plan. So essentially, my work is to see if the data is informing us in the way that it should, and if we are consistently improving across the state. Then we also had a dialogue session, which was very rich. We didn't make it past the first question on the dialogue. And so we were really wanting to hear from the district and school representatives and other representatives about how they were using ESSA Index to communicate with stakeholders and what that process was like for them. So from that fruitful discussion, we realized that perhaps we should have a couple of possibly quarterly meetings that would be longer so that we could complete those dialogue sessions. Do you have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I didn't get my text in, but Gina did Hope, I guess she presented her part in her previous, because I don't think anybody's on, are they? Okay, okay, all right. All right, so I think Hope covered all the assessment report in her previous presentation. And C, educator equity and effectiveness, we have a lot of those team members that are out today, so if there's any information there, we'll make sure we send that to you all in an email, okay? So the next item is English learners, and Tricia Kerr is here to give us an update on that. Yeah, and there are clickers right there on the, behind the, yeah, right there.
Because I'm so short. Turn it on the side. And we've got it, okay. Well, thank you for letting me come today and update you on what the English Learner Advisory Team has been doing. We have done a lot of work over the last year and a half, as all the ESSA groups have. I'm going to just remind you that, we have been meeting. We've met now 16 times. We most recently met a couple weeks ago, and we maintain everything in a public folder for anyone to go back and reference as they need to. I'm a little, okay. That better? Okay. These are some of the members now on the ESSA English Learners Title III Advocate Group. We had to update some due to moves in and out of the state or out of positions. There's a wide range of people who we consult with and include in this group, including Melissa Bratton here, who's on your steering committee. One of the things that we've worked on is in the ESSA plan, we had to have common English learner entrance and exit procedures. And so this group gave a lot of input and feedback on what those should be, along with surveying the ESOL coordinators a few times about this. And then Alan Lytle and I went around the state and did the summer tour of the co-ops and a Little Rock site as well to offer training on the draft version. We used feedback from that training to come up with the final version, which is now posted on the English Learners page. So all the items necessary to do the entry and exit work regarding English learners is available there. We've provided webinars on how to use those procedures. We provided the exit criteria was in the spring that we made that final, and we've provided webinars about that. One of the things that we will be doing this year is this is, implementation year, and we're going to do an implementation survey to get feedback from the practitioners in the field about how it's working. And are there things that we need to update or address or clarify so that we have a smooth rollout? This has resulted in some districts identifying kids they didn't know existed before we had these common procedures. So that then has led us to some further questions getting from the field of, okay, well, now we know we have the kids help. So I do have 2 EL specialists, and we're trying to help all those districts, especially who are new to working with these students. There are some required forms that we developed. Ones that are for parents, we have translated into 5 other languages so that districts don't have to do that. And then there are some sample forms that are referenced in our materials of different times they need to notify parents about the child's placement or their exit or their monitoring status. So we've provided sample letters that districts can tweak to fit their specific environment, because some of the things reference programming that you offer. The state doesn't tell you what kind of programming to offer, but we have a letter set up that they can tweak it. If they use this letter, it is available in 5 other languages. So many of the schools are using that now. You see there's several sample letters to use. Regarding the new exit criteria, it has now fully rolled out. We have ELPA 21, which changed on us 3 years ago, which did affect some data that we're going to share with you in a few minutes, Denise and I, about needing to change the on-track to ELP goals. But all the information about the exit criteria, including ELPA 21, as well as districts, their LPAC having to show, and LPAC's a Language Proficiency and Assessment Committee, that the student has 2 pieces of evidence aligned to state content area standards and ELP standards that support them being proficient in addition to ELPA 21. You've heard the data that we get on English learners is only as good as what the schools give us. So we have been working hard to try to help with data entry with the districts, and that's partly as a result of the work of this task force, saying that they really wanted more help in getting guidance on how to get their data entered. So this is all on the English learners page as well. Then the thing that we met about most recently, I'm just going to say briefly now so that when we get to the part of item 7, we can talk about the full amendment to the ESSA plan. But On Track to English Language Proficiency is a reporting only piece. It'll be part of the long-term goals reports. And it is a measure of are students making progress as they should towards becoming proficient. It's based on the theory and the research that it takes time, and it's different depending on whether a student begins with us in kindergarten and they're a beginner level 1 student in reading. That kid will take a certain amount of time compared to a kindergartner who begins at level 3 out of 5 in reading. A 6th grader who comes to us and is level 1 in reading will take even more time than that kindergartner who came to us at level 1 in reading will take. So our charts that we look at in just a second to determine if someone's on track takes that into account. And we consider a student on track if they exit English learner status, if they meet their time expectations on 3 or more of the 4 ELPA 21 domains, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, or they meet all their expectations on their remaining domains if they are exempt from a domain for some reason that Alan Lytle approves. Just a reminder, these are the charts. You can see for K2, we allow up to 6 years for a level 1 student to move from level 1 in that domain to proficient. Whereas in grades 3 to 5, we allow a student who begins with us in 3rd grade at level 1 to take 7 years. As opposed to in 6th to 12th grade, a level 1 student, we would allow them to take 8 years. Now, because learning does not stop when they leave our doors in 12th grade, it continues. So the idea is that they need to be making steady progress to English proficiency, as opposed to saying a certain % of students have to be proficient before they leave, because it depends on the students you receive and keeping them on track. At high school, level 2 is allowed an additional year than the other grades in level 3 as well. There's just more language to learn to become proficient the older you are. So I'm not going to go in depth right now about this, but the ESSA steering committee, we spent a long time looking at a report that I'll show you in the next time I'm up here, looking at 3 options to determine, is our baseline, do we need to reset our goals for our on track to English language proficiency? That has been greatly affected by changing to ELPA 21 3 years ago. So we had a large group of students exit in 2016 and another large group exit in 2017. So now that we're at 2018, it's looking like, especially from that 2016 group no longer being in the picture, that we're declining. And so we're to try to determine what's the best set of goals to have and not have that negatively impacting or just skewing the data, whether it's negative or positive, doesn't really matter, it's just skewing it. We know we needed to reset it, so we had Pete Goldschmidt come and work with Denise Arola and I and some members from this advisory team, and we came up with 3 ways to look at it. Option 1 and 2, I'm gonna make it short and sweet. It's basically saying, okay, we're only gonna use ELPA 21 data. We're not gonna dip back into all of their scores from ELDA and ELPA 21. We'll just do that. Long story short, that doesn't work, okay? That isn't going to help us. So we also looked at just revising option 3, which is similar to what we're doing with the English language arts and math goals because of the change in assessment and resetting the baseline. And I'll update you on that, but the group did recommend option 3. So purpose right now is to let you know that that team recommends option 3. We're always here to help districts. We have a lot going on. The group, I thought I would mention that our On Track to English Language Proficiency model that we have, that it's differentiated by grade levels and when a student begins in proficiency level, that it is one of the models being featured by AIR in their guidebook for English language learners that they're preparing for the Office for State Support for the U.S. Department of Ed. So I've been working with Diane August on editing the section about our state for that guidebook. But I thought that is something to make sure you're aware of, that our model is something that caught their attention and they want to show as an option that states could consider. So,
Well,
do you have any questions?
I'm glad you brought that up, Tricia, because I was going to ask you to elaborate because, you know, just to maybe an outside observer, somebody looking at 6 years, it's like, what do you mean? 6 years, 8 years, you don't even have them. You know, that's beyond the point they graduate. But, you know, we just didn't make this up to give
To give
too
the
much
Department of Ed
flexibility.
something.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of work and a lot of expertise that went into this. So I'm glad you mentioned that there at the end because you really addressed the question I was going to ask you. So thank you.
Good. Are there any other questions? And there has been a lot of data work behind this.
I'm curious because we know, and Melissa, maybe you can speak to this, in different regions of our state where we have English learners, and maybe those English learners come from different countries or even regions, you know, they're not all kids coming from Mexican descent or whatever. I mean, we have a very diverse element there across the state. How has that dynamic worked with the work y'all are doing?
I can just speak from a district's perspective, but in our district alone, we actually have, I think, 11 different languages, so 11 different countries that these students come from. Our highest populations are Spanish speakers, but they range from Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala, so they're from different parts of those countries as well. And so the work that Tris, I just want to say thank you too, just because the work that you and your team put in has really allowed us at the district level and at the school level to really have an understanding of what this really means. And so seeing in the past where I feel like our language learners were, they weren't understood, they were a population that wasn't really, or subpop that wasn't really understood, and now with the clarity that the state puts out, it's been super beneficial in having to serve, or being able to serve a wide range of populations and cultures and areas.
And it's a great question, and one we're getting ready to dive deeper into with our ESOL coordinators at our annual ESOL coordinator meeting, November 13th, up in Northwest Arkansas, but everyone from the state is invited to that. We'll actually be having districts look at the English learner profiles in their district, because not every English learner is the same. We have different language backgrounds. We have different educational backgrounds. We have some coming to us from other countries with limited formal education. We have others that come pretty well educated. And then we have most are born here, coming from different family backgrounds. So one of the things we'll be diving into is look at your district and determine where there's 4 quadrants that they'll be kind of placing their students in. What kind of population do you have? And then what are the best services to offer each of those populations? What you offer a newcomer with limited formal education is different than you offer a newcomer who's adequately educated before they come, which is also different than you offer a long-term English learner who's been identified for more than 6 years. You need to do something different for each group. And so we'll be diving into some different program models that work for those groups and ways you can look at your data to see, well, who do I have and how are they doing? And in my district, which groups are doing better, which are more successful and which aren't, so I can help address the ones that aren't and build capacity that way. We do have 100 languages other than English in Arkansas as of last school year. We're going to evaluate Cycle 2 data shortly from this school year, but it was 100 languages last year.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Any other questions?
Well, we're gonna, just got a note that Dr. Arola has a plane to catch from
Yes,
wherever
she
she is.
does.
So we're gonna move item 7 up. So while you're
That is
here,
great.
Tricia, let's go ahead and talk about that one.
Okay. That is the PDF I sent you. He is awesome.
Yes, he is. Dan, the control man.
Oh, Lordy.
Okay. Denise, do you want to take the lead on this?
Well, Tricia, I think you did a really great job of explaining that, how we got to the point of even running 3 different options and why we ended up thinking that option 3 was our best bet. It's when we first started working on the data from Arkansas, we started with 2016 and had done all the modeling in the background, knowing that we were going to have this weird year where we had students who were coming out of English learner services, so exiting as proficient for English language acquisition, but not really sure how it would affect the data in the future. So when we did have our technical assistance meeting with Dr. Goldschmidt, it was fun because we could run the data live right with him and explore these questions. And what I found neat about that was he said very few states can do this, can actually sit down with him and run it right there with him. And because of that, we started looking at how the numbers for the percentages of students on track were where we'd set them in 2017, they had declined a little bit. And we thought, well, we didn't know how far out this methodology would need to be before we wouldn't see that effect of this transition for the tests. And so we ran all the data that are in your PDF, and there's a lot of it in there. And we explored a variety of things that would impact or help the advisory team think through decision-making about options 1, 2, and 3. And in the end, it just is, there's more integrity. The 3 tables that Tricia shared with you were very thoughtfully constructed from the general research on how students acquire language, and they were informed by Arkansas's data as well. And so with options 1 and 2, we're having to kind of force fit those tables, and it just doesn't work. We think that if we reset the baseline this year, we'll have gotten past most of the impact of the larger number of students who are exiting using the ELPA 21 as one of the criteria. Also, as teachers and leaders are learning more about their English learner data, we think that this is going to level off, and schools would have a baseline. If we update it for 2018, we would have a baseline from which we would have expectations of improvement. All of those different pages give you information about what the options look like in terms of the average percent. But what we have seen with option 3, I think at the bottom of that PDF, there are some charts. There's scatter plots. Tricia,
Right.
did you include the scatter
Can you
plots?
scroll down to the last 3 pages? I'll tell
One of
you
the most important things that we've been doing is to look at how well, it's like what Dr. Boyd mentioned. We want to know that the work that we're doing, that the data that are supporting the ESSA School Index or a part of the ESSA School Index or a part of our accountability plan, that they're meaningful, that they're valid, and that they're reliable. And so when we went and ran a check to see if the English learner growth model that we're using in the ESSA Index and the percent of students on track, we would hope to see a relationship between those two so that the information you're getting about progress towards long-term goals and the information that you're getting about growth of English learners in acquiring English language, we want those to be telling similar information. And option 3, the original methods that we proposed in ESSA, but just resetting the baseline using 2018 data, that has the most validity for that relationship. And so in talking to the advisory team about the implications of that, those scatter plots that are in there where for options 1 and 2, they're pretty much points scattered all over the charts. That shows you that there's not really a strong relationship between those 2 important measures of English language acquisition. And for option 3, you actually see a slight relationship, and we feel that that's probably going to grow over time as people are intentional in identifying, are the students in my school acquiring English language as expected? And what that does is it gives schools even more information to help them understand the effectiveness of the work that they're doing in English language services. So it's option 3 really came out as the most well thought out from the beginning. And what we're dealing with is just that we had a test transition from 2015 to 2016, and we think we can make the best case to reset the baseline to 2018 so that that baseline is most reflective of a good starting point after the effects of test transition.
And we can show the new baseline by looking at the quartile table. Is that correct?
Yes, the quantile table can show you.
Quantile table, sorry. I think that's on page 3.
So originally we had a percentage of 32%. That was the 32% of students on track at a school, on track towards proficiency. That was the value at the 25th percentile. And we set the goal in 12 years to get to the value that's at the 75th percentile. And on the right-hand side of the table, you can see what that shift would be. And Tricia, you can see the numbers better than I can
Right.
from there,
So-
so you can call them out.
Right, so instead of having the goal being moving from the 31st or 32nd in the plan to the 52nd percent being on track, we're changing it to starting at 29% or 28.6% and raising the group to being 46%. I think that
Over
that's
the
a more accurate goal for us to work our districts towards, because this allows that impact from changing to ELPA 21 3 years ago to no longer be affecting the overall table.
Yeah. And the important thing there is we're setting that at that lower point, that 28.67. We recognize, and we were approved for this methodology. We're just asking to reset the baseline to move further away from that test transition. You know, we do have half of our schools, more than half of our schools, meeting or exceeding that point. But the question also is, you know, if your school isn't, why not? And what can be done to change that? So again, it's thinking about that. This is a signal, another signal that schools can use to think more deeply at the local level and to inquire into why or why not things are happening as they want.
So, do you have any questions for us about this?
Is this something that will have to be submitted for approval?
Yes, we will have to submit this for red line, if that's what you mean.
Okay.
Yes.
I think Deb talked a little bit about that process too.
We not only want to submit this amendment, but we also, in consultation with our technical advisory committee, will recommend to you that we submit an amendment for the ELA long-range goals that are also in our plan. Neither one of these are part of the what we would consider accountability. It's more a part of the reporting. We're
Yes.
required to report long-term goals. And it helps schools to look at themselves kind of in the bigger picture of how they are progressing. But when we posed this question to our Technical Advisory Committee, or TAC, they instantly said, yes, you should request amendment. Anytime you've made a major change like the assessment for English learners or the ELA cut scores for all students, that because this is reporting, it should be as informative to our stakeholders as it can be. And so therefore they recommended amendments to both. And so Denise, if you'll kind of take it away and talk a little bit about the ELA cut score amendment we're requesting.
I can do that. Let me share my screen here. Let me get my PowerPoint up and then share my screen. And I'm gonna hopefully do this very short and sweet, because the bottom line is that we have had some things that come along. Most states, we were in talking with our TAC, a lot of states, when we were all submitting our ESSA.
Denise,
Yes.
we need you to stop sharing for a moment and let us move you over into the full screen.
Yikes. Oh no, will I be a giant head? Oh no. Okay.
Okay,
Oh.
now share your computer.
Okay, good. Yeah, when pretty much most states that submitted during ESSA, a lot of people have been in or were about to go into transitions with tests. And so this is one of the most common first amendments that we're seeing across the US. And it's, in our case, the reason for our submission has to do with the change that occurred with the ELA college readiness benchmark. And so what we're going to propose is that the long-term, that we reset the baseline for the long-term goals. And as Deb has mentioned, those are really reporting. We have to have these aspirational long-term goals and checkpoints. It's part of our plan. We know that folks will pay attention to it. We want it to be something that's useful, so we want to make sure that it's always valid and reliable information that they're getting. And so we established those long-term goals at the time on 2017 data. And then I'm just going to go quickly through the why we're proposing a change. And in this case, it's because there were some changes to the 2018 ACT Aspire. Prior to 2018, the English Language Arts benchmark was not connected to an actual predictive relationship with college readiness or college courses based on the ACT. The ACT Incorporated did that research and connected the English Language Arts and STEM scores on the ACT to college courses. Those are represented in this particular slide. And what that effectively did was create a back-mapped set of cut scores for the readiness benchmarks for the English Language Arts scores on the ACT Aspire. And because it's based on the set of courses that are connected to the ACT, when you look at this list of courses, you can see that it's a little bit more rigorous of a level for ELA and STEM than perhaps these other pieces had been in and of themselves. So in 2018, when ACT Aspire applied those new benchmarks to our scores, I jumped this slide to the front. What we saw, this is the difference, the red means it's negative. What we saw was even though students are actually improving in their scaled scores, because we did that analysis as well, we know that we had across the state on average, students were actually improving in English Language Arts based on their scaled score. But because of the change in the readiness benchmark, it was impacting the percent of students considered ready or exceeding. And you can see that that's pretty dramatic in English Language Arts. And we did see some up and down in mathematics as well. So we're proposing that we use the 2018 data to reset the English Language Arts baseline for the long-term goals and checkpoints for progress. And if you don't have ESSA every page memorized in your head, the long-term goal is 80% in 12 years. And we're just proposing that the starting point be a little different. And you should also have a handout that gives you that comparison, and it'll show you the long-term goals that were in our original proposal that were approved with our ESSA plan. They're in tables in Appendix A. And then we have updated that information with the 2018 data post-review. So you have this information in front of you to see what that means in terms of those baselines and the trajectories heading towards that 80%. One good reason to do math, English Language Arts, and English learner proficiency, or on track to English learner proficiency all at the same time, is that it will keep us with the same destination year of 2030, which they all are right now in our plan. They're all the same 12-year goal of 2029. And if we start to have one on this year and one on that year and another on another year, it gets a little confusing for schools and for others.
So just quickly, those are links on our agenda. So if you want to access them that way, that's fine. If you want copies to be emailed to you, we can do that. Gina can take care of that for you. So just let her know which one you prefer.
And so our procedure will be, when you hear us say red line, we actually take the Word document of our ESSA plan, and we have to go in, and every change has to be denoted in red font, underlined so that it's easily accessible. And then we have to submit a cover letter to Secretary DeVos explaining why we are requesting a change. And so we're working on putting that together. It sounds so easy to go into that Word document and make changes, but if you recall, that thing is massive and it was worked on by so many people, it's fragile. So we all get nervous just the thought of going back into the original document and working on it.
Yes.
But we anticipate having that ready to go and wordsmithing on our letter sometime early November, middle of November, right, Denise?
Yes, yes. And then hopefully, we can get out long-term goal reports so that folks can actually see their information relative to those long-term goals and checkpoints.
So we're interested in your feelings. If you feel like our TAC does, I presented this to our committee of practitioners, which is a part of our federal requirements to have a committee that's always ongoing, that looks at everything we're doing federally, and they were much in favor of this proposed amendments, and we just wanted to get your feedback. Thumbs
So,
up, thumbs down?
I
Yes.
know you said this, but tell me again, what was the reason for the disparity in other content areas while it's greater in ELA? How was those, were all the baselines set the same way? And the reason why there's
So
disparity?
in math,
Uh-huh,
Denise?
that's fine.
The methodology is the same. Basically, we just, you have to determine your baseline year, which at the time, for the purpose of submitting ESSA, we had to use the most recent data, which was the 2017 data. At the time of our submission, which, I'm in the same boat where we've done a couple of years in a year. So we submitted way back. I want to say we had a submission and feedback in the summer of 2017. And then September of 2017, we were submitting those baselines. At the time, we did not know that ACT, Aspire, or ACT were going to be changing those ELA readiness benchmarks. And the ELA readiness benchmark is basically their cut score at which a student is either determined to be ready on a trajectory to be ready for college and career, based on their back mapping, or not ready. And the subjects of science, reading, math, and English did not change and writing, they did not change. The only thing that changed was the cut score for ready and exceeds and close for the composite of English language arts and the composite score of STEM. And the only one of those two that impacts our ESSA is the ELA score. But we felt if we were going to update ELA, it would probably be wise to keep math on the same timeline and use the same year for baseline scores.
Okay, that totally makes sense. And you probably said that, but hearing it twice helped me understand.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just the language. It's, kids that, I think teachers have probably looked at kids' reports and seen that their line of improvement is going up, but because they changed the spot on that line that says you're ready, and they raised it in all grade levels but grade 3, students that are actually on an improvement path may have not made enough improvement to hit the new ready line. So.
And I remember the conversation now when the readiness benchmark had changed. So now, and I think it's justified to request that we're able to reset a new baseline.
So we are required to report this, I would assume, in our annual report card timeline of April 15th of each year. We plan to work on our report cards much earlier, and we had originally planned to put this out as a separate report because we felt it would be very user-friendly for school districts to have that capacity. So we're going to be testing what the visual of that may look like. So we're going to go ahead and work on that visual, and we may want to come back and send out some things for people to test to say, yes, that's great, or no, that makes no sense. But we don't know what our timeline for response from Secretary DeVos's office will be. So we will be prepared for whatever the decision is, to report that by April 15th either way. So we want to spend some time in between testing our visuals to make sure they're informative.
All right. Thank you for that presentation. No other questions on that. We'll move back to item number 6. So Gina? Thank you, Dr. Arola.
Thanks, Denise. Good morning. I'm going to share with you some of the measures we've been taking concerning communication with communities, but I think that's already been evident by the things you've heard today. The questions that we're getting, the interaction that we're having with schools, with districts, with educators, with co-op directors, ERZ directors, stakeholders across the state. It's because we're out there spreading the message, and so they know what questions to ask. They feel comfortable contacting us and trying to get more information. But I will tell you about all the things that we've done as well. Internally, we have been training our folks so that they are prepared to answer these questions. We do that in a variety of ways. One of the primary ways that we do that is through our strategic performance management days, our First Friday days. We bring folks in. We offer PD here to train our team so that they know what's going on and know how to respond. We've also started using a new performance management tool called Basecamp, and that has been kind of pretty much a game changer, I would say. When schools contact us and they have a question and they need technical assistance, or they have a question, you can post it out there. Someone's going to pick up on it and they're going to take care of it. Almost immediately, they're responding to those things. And then that helps us not duplicate our efforts, but also make sure that our stakeholders' needs are being met. Just the other day, a district reached out to me. They were having some issues coding some of their ELL kids, and I posted it in Basecamp, and pretty much within that day, Tricia and her team had reached back out to that district. So our response time has greatly increased, as well as our internal communication around these questions. We have been attending and hosting co-op meetings across the state in the summer and in the fall. 15 co-ops, some of them more than once. We call that our Great Road Show. And we travel and we get out there. Lots of times it's superintendents, but we are noticing that more of the co-ops are inviting district and building level teams as well. And that's really where your reach is, because the folks in the buildings are the ones that are actually doing that work and need that information to make sure on a day-to-day basis that it's being done correctly and with fidelity. We've also had schools reach out to us over this summer. Can you come and speak to our staff at our professional development over the summer? They need to know more about ESSA. They need to know more about this. And so we have. We are in the midst of visiting different regions. I think there's 14 altogether with the School Board Association. You were in Balmain last night? Yeah. So we have finished just over half of those, and we will continue meeting with those stakeholders as well. Family and community engagement, they've had 5 regional meetings across the state, and they've been spreading the word about this also. We've had webinars. Dr. Brewer has done some really short and public school accountability Powtoon videos that we've pushed out on social media that just give a quick overview of ESSA. Our social media, we push things out weekly on that, commissioners' memos, research and technology with their ambassador academies, training folks on all of our data tools. We had a supersize academy this summer just for superintendents, and they were able to come and get trained on those data tools. We have members of our team that attend co-op directors meetings and TCC meetings. We are meeting with ERZ directors and STEM center coordinators. We're on the move, and we're spreading the word as best we can. And I think, as I said earlier, that's evident by the calls and the questions that we're getting from schools, because they're really digging into that data. Just this morning before I came down, I got a call from a superintendent, and he said, "Hey, I saw your presentation. I have a follow-up question." And so they're paying attention, And they're wanting to do the right things for their schools, but they're really wanting to do right things for kids. And the conversations are definitely changing. And I'm just so proud of the work that we're doing here. Does anybody have any questions or suggestions on how we could best reach out to more people? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Gina. Okay, and now we'll plan for the next meeting.
So, Mr. Key, I'd like to propose that we come back together at least by January. Hopefully by that time we'll have some news on our amendment. We'll have some updates on our work on the report card, and so I think we'll have several things to share.
Okay. So by the end of January or by the 1st of January?
I typed in the word January as my passcode. That didn't work a bit.
Are you saying you want to meet again by the end before the end of the year?
No, I think probably need to meet by the beginning of the second semester, so sometime middle January would be perfect.
Okay. All right. Does that create a problem for anyone? We'll certainly get potential dates out there to y'all and let you look at it and provide feedback. Is there anything that you all would want us to present or the department to bring information about? And if you don't know the answer to that now, you're certainly welcome to make that request. Maybe there's, there are some questions, some feedback that you've received that, or you will receive that you want the department to address, and we certainly want to be responsive to that. So would make that invitation to you all to let us know if there's anything. And certainly, Ms. Kennison, with your, we hit you with all kinds of things. And so any clarification, whether you or any other member needs on any of this, that we can present between now and the next meeting or at the next meeting, please let us know. So we want you to have the tools that you need to be able to go out and communicate this work to the groups that you represent. Okay, all right. Anything else?
So the two things I have on the list already is definitely our stakeholder feedback at that point,
And the amendment.
progress on our amendments.
Okay. And we'll keep that list open for the time being, and unless we hear back, and we may hear there may be something from the state board that they'll want information on too as well. Okay. All right. That's it. I wanted to acknowledge one of our state board members, but she slipped out, Ms. Zook, who is a regular attendee of these meetings, and also want to recognize and acknowledge some parents and student advocates that are here today who are always welcome in these meetings, and thanks for your engagement and ongoing support of this work. Anything from the members? All right, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, in a second?
I second.
All in favor, aye. All right, thank you all.